Soda water.
Okay, let's check and make sure that you are good to go.
Soda water.
Okay, you are live and visible. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming to this talk, and thanks so much for attending this weekend event. This is such a cool thing that is going on, celebrating women in beer, and we are super stoked to be a part of it. I'm Casey Hoeg, this is Rebecca Keating, and Katie Randall. We are going to basically take you on a tour of sorts through our process, as well as kind of some personal history of the three of us in beer. We'll answer questions at the end. If anything's like super pressing, we'll try and kind of keep an idea of what's going on and answer them in real time if necessary. So Imperial Yeast was founded in 2014, basically with the attitude that if you're going to do something, you should do it right. We started making yeast about a year later, so summer of 2015, and immediately started selling that to commercial breweries. Later that fall, we started packaging our yeast in homebrew format and made it available to amateur brewers around the country and around the world. Since then, we've experienced some exponential growth and really just kind of exceeded our wildest dreams and imaginations in terms of where we are now and the timeline that it took to get here. We now operate from two coasts. So our headquarters are located in Portland, Oregon. That's where myself and KB are located. And our secondary production facility is out in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where Rebecca is. We strive each day to deliver quality, transparency, and service to brewers of all sizes, backgrounds, and locations. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to Rebecca, our Philadelphia lab manager.
Thank you, Casey. So yeah, I'm Rebecca. I'm coming at you live from Philadelphia. So yeah, I'm just gonna give you like a little background on myself and like how I ended up being in craft beer. And yeah, so I've worked in the craft beer industry for just under a year now. So I'm pretty new, pretty green. I have a biology background, and I started my science career at the New Jersey Department of Agriculture in their plant industry lab. I went into that originally because I had done a lot of research in my undergrad on the declining honeybee populations, very hot topic. And I ended up helping the New Jersey state apiarist at the time, Tim Schuler, collect pollen samples for a Cornell study that they were doing on the types and quantities of pesticides found in pollen stores in hives. So basically, we were going out to beekeepers' hives with popsicle sticks and just like taking pollen out and then sending it to Cornell for chromatography testing. So through Tim, I ended up getting a job offer in the plant industry lab and started out doing more honeybee disease screening. We did ELISA testing on plant tissue for viruses that affect commodity crops like blueberries and cranberries, tobacco, tomato plants, seed purity and germination testing. And we also did beneficial insects. So we propped a Pediococcus wasp, no relation to the contaminant found in beer. And they parasitized Mexican bean beetles. And I finished out my career there doing lots of stuff with medical marijuana and industrial hemp, doing more chromatography stuff. So lots of chemistry. But I very shortly hit a dead end at Department of Agriculture, and it's just, part of being public sector. So I was shopping around for a new job for like over a year, and alternate universe positions that other Rebeccas and other universes have include plenty of pharmaceutical companies, because I'm in Philly, so I'm in like the large molecule capital of the country. Doing medical marijuana startups, rapid COVID testing at CHOP, and tons of other jobs. I applied to dozens and dozens. And then one day on Indeed, there was this really cool job that popped up for a place called Imperial Yeast, which I had never heard of before. And it sounded really cool. And I applied on a whim and I got the job. And here I am almost a year later. And now I work in a completely different industry than what I expected. Yeah, so, and I started this job during COVID, so it's just been quite a whirlwind this past year for me. So getting into what I do here at Imperial Yeast. So I'm the QC lab manager at the Philadelphia location, and the process of growing yeast starts and ends in the laboratory. The lab is where we propagate strains from our bank. So we'll scrape a couple brave cells from our little slants that we have and inoculate them into some tasty media, and then provide them the conditions they need to flourish and increase their population exponentially until eventually we have a whole Erlenmeyer flask of yeast to hand off to production for them to do their magic in the cellar. And then once it reaches terminal gravity in the tank in production, they pull a sample and they give it back to the lab, and we screen for several parameters for quality control. So one of them is cell concentration. So we determine the number of cells per liter in each batch, and this helps us to accurately quantify the cells. So we make sure that we get our target 11 million cells per liter. KC, I'm sorry, will go into more depth about these numbers with you guys later when she talks about sales stuff. We also do cell viability, which is we determine the percentage of live cells in each batch. And if it's below a certain threshold, it just does not pass our QC and we don't sell that batch. So another thing that we do is plating, and that's like exactly what you think of when you think of microbiology. It's like petri dishes filled with different media, and we plate our yeast and kind of see what grows. The types of media that we used are what's called selective media, and they are selective of, they kind of test for different parameters. So we have one called LCSM, and it screens for diastaticus positive yeast cells and also for non-Saccharomyces strains of yeast. So that media contains a copper sulfate salt that other yeast genuses as well as diastaticus strains of Sac can endure, but your standard Saccharomyces are much more sensitive to this salt and will not thrive. So basically, if there's any stat positive yeast that are in a sample, it will thrive on this plate and we'll be able to see it. Another media that we use is UBA, which is short for Universal Beer Agar. It's pretty self-explanatory. We use that to look for basically everything. We look for lacto, pediococcus, acetobacter, and any wild yeast strains that could be found infecting the pitching yeast. So yeah. And then we also use WLN, and that's the fun one. It's this like beautiful blue media, and that's what we do like the streaking on. So we'll look at the colony growth, size and shape of the colonies. And this is my favorite one to do because this is really where the personalities of all the different yeast strains shine, because they all pick up the blue dye differently. And it's interesting. When I worked in medical marijuana, I was acutely aware of all of the different strains and cultivars of marijuana. And it's interesting to see that that sort of diversity also exists in another species like yeast, which I never even thought of before I started working in beer. So that was really, really cool. Another really cool part of my job is doing quantitative PCR. And that is a very, very sensitive, it's basically the same technology that is used to do the COVID testing. So like if you send a sample in for PCR testing, it's the same kind of technology. And our particular assays are sensitive enough to pick up on a single contaminant, a single bug that's living in a sample. So if there's just one little lactobacillus bacteria cell living in a sample, our PCR assay will be able to detect it. So it's very sensitive. It's really, really cool. I like a lot of stuff about working in the craft beer industry. The work culture is super fun and exciting. I feel like the beer industry just sort of naturally attracts like funky, goofy people with very diverse interests. We've got woodworkers here, biking enthusiasts, we've got video game nerds. I was trained by a D&D dungeon master, gardeners, and of course there's homebrewers. And another thing that's great about here is that there is opportunity and room for growth in this industry that I just have not been around before, especially working in a public sector. Yeah, and I also started working in beer the week that the whole rat magnet Instagram stuff really started blowing up. So just right out the gate of me working in this industry, I've seen a lot of very remarkable efforts in a lot of places to be more inclusive, not just to women, but also to like members of the LGBTQ community and people of color as well. So it's nice to work in a place where I can sort of see people trying to take the steps to better this industry as a whole in that regard. Yeah, so as much as I like this industry, that I have been met with some challenges. It's very much startup culture. At Imperial Yeast, we've been growing, as Casey mentioned, exponentially. And it's very, very stark difference from working at a department that was established like 100 years ago for obvious reasons. I have had to adapt my workflow to change every couple of months as the company grows and our wants and needs change over time. And it's just forced me to have to look at more big picture aspects and predict problems, procedures, supplies that I'm going to need 6 months, a year, 2 years from now. And there's also this pressure of working in the private sector versus the public sector, because previously I worked a regulatory job. I would get samples, I would test them, and then I would send the report out and then just not a care in the world about the results or like what the data was saying. But now I have like an emotional investment in how good our data is, because, you know, I had my hands in those yeasts and so did my colleagues. And there's a lot of pressure to see like good data. Not that I have an issue with seeing good data here, you know, we grow good products, but yeah, it's just like, it's kind of nice to have that sort of investment in what the data is going to spit back at you. So, and then getting more nitty gritty, we've been growing more temperamental stuff here. So we started growing lacto at the Philly lab, and it's just notoriously fickle, and even industry veterans have not exactly perfected growing lacto in-house. But I'm happy to say that we have successfully grown lacto. We have been selling it out of the Philadelphia location. So that's really cool. That was a big accomplishment for me this year. And if I could do everything all over again, I wouldn't change a single thing about how stuff turned out for me personally. I took a risk in changing industries, even though I was scared. I was really scared. And I drastically improved my skill set and my position and my quality of life as a result. I listened to this little voice in the back of my head that just told me to just give it a shot. 10 years ago, I was an undeclared second semester sophomore at a state college, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I took a biology class and then realized that I was enamored by the sciences and the window it can give you to the world. And I never saw myself being a STEM person until this moment I realized that I was up for the challenge. So I've been trying to just like manifest that sort of outlook on other things. And it got me here. So I guess it's working. I'm looking forward to being on the other side of my learning curve here at Imperial, and I feel like I'm approaching that. I feel like the hardest part is over. I feel like I belong here now in the craft beer industry. And I'm also looking forward to being able to have time to hone in on new techniques that can make my job easier, better, improve Imperial as a whole. And most importantly, I'm looking forward to being the supervisor that I always wish that I had like throughout my 20s. I'm looking forward to advocating for better wages and titles and conditions for the lab, and providing opportunities to learn skills and gain experience that will be beneficial to their careers. And that's basically it, my spiel. I'm going to pass the mic over to KB, who's going to talk about production stuff, and she's got a lot of cool stuff to say. So take it away, KB.
All right. Thanks for that, Rebecca. Hi, my name is KB Brandel, and I'm a production technician here at Imperial. I've been here for about 2 years. Our production facility is open 7 days a week, and we are producing right now. So I do want to start off by saying I am at work and I am the lead. So if I have to step out real quick, it's because, something's going on. So I do apologize if that does happen. We work with a lot of really awesome but sensitive equipment here, so it does make time off the floor a little bit challenging. But I'm really happy to be here with y'all. I've been working in the craft beer industry for about 6 years now. Like a lot of folks in craft beer, I did not intend for this to be my long-term career at all. I went to UC Davis, which is a school known for brewing science and food science, but I did not study any of that stuff while I was there. I was an evolutionary anthropology student. I thought I was going to study human bones and human remains for the rest of my life. But after I graduated, my girlfriend at the time was taking the Intro to Beer and Brewing class. And I just picked up her textbook one day and just like fell in love with it. I fell in love with the content. I thought it was so cool to like look at a beverage in that way. And there was way more to beer than just like going out to college parties or bars or all that stuff. So from there, I was kind of all in, wanting to like find my way into the industry. I started working at Sudwork Brewing Company, which is a local Davis brewery. I worked front of house and just got really excited talking about beer, learning about beer. And then from there, I was their taproom manager and events and marketing coordinator. So that was like really cool to just be creative and do some fun things with a tap room and just like get to know beer better and also the community around beer better. I'd been in Davis for a while at that point, and I kind of decided that I wanted to take my beer career to the next level. And I was looking around at places to move, and Portland super stuck out to me. It's one of like the few cities that we just have a lot of really good craft beer surrounding us. So I moved up here about 4 years ago. I was doing a lot of front of house stuff. And then the pandemic happened, which really changed the game for front of house work. And it allowed me to kind of reflect on what I was doing and whether or not I wanted to stay in beer or move around. And then I decided that I did. And I found this production job at Imperial. And I had heard about Imperial from some friends about how great a business it was. So I just went for it. And here I am 2 years later. I'm going to kind of walk you guys through a day in the life in production. I'm kind of going to walk it like through segments, but really the production environment is like ever flowing. There's not like this is happening, then this is happening, then this. It's like all of it's happening all at once. And that's one thing that I really love about the job is it's really fast paced. And it's very much a team effort where all of these pieces need to be moving. And we have like a really awesome team that does that here. Our space does look a lot like a commercial brewery. We got stainless steel tanks, we've got CIP pumps, we've got a kettle, all those parts. But in a lot of ways, it's very different. I like to tell my I have to tell my friends constantly that I'm not a brewer. I would liken myself more to a yeast farmer, and I'm going to kind of use that metaphor a little bit, where, like Rebecca said, the lab gives us starts. Those are kind of our seeds, and we then plant them and grow them here in production, and then harvest them for the lab to kind of finish the packaged product, and sales will sell it. And it all kind of starts with the cook, which is basically our brewing system. Our version of wort is we call media because it's basically the same thing that we do every day. We have our regular media, which does have gluten in it, and then sometimes we do gluten-free media. But for the most part, we're like making the same batch every day. We use a pressure-rated steam kettle because boiling isn't going to be good enough for us. We have to sterilize everything. So we really have to heat up our media to really high temperatures. When we're cooking, we're basically just filling our kettle up with water, dumping our ingredients, and then shutting the top and letting our boiler and steam do the rest of the work for us. We typically brew a high gravity media every day, just because we have a lot of tanks and a lot of fill needs that we need to do. So we'll do that, and then we dilute it down with sterile water. So we do a lot of like tank additions where we're hooking up and adding water and then adding media. So that's a big part of our day. Once a tank gets its media and water additions, we'll inoculate it. And we do that either by flask from the lab, or we'll do a direct inox where we're taking just a full carboy and inoculating a tank like that. When we do a flask inoculation, we're usually doing a step inoculation, which means we just like add a little bit to start and then like build it up to fill the rest of the tank. And the reason why we do that is to kind of give the yeast the ideal environment to continue to grow. So it has just the right amount of ingredients for its size. And we found that that really works and produces like high yields and like very viable yeast. Once a tank has been filled completely, we are going to then start checking its gravities. We monitor density and pH. Our strains ferment at 69 degrees Fahrenheit most of the time. Some of our wild strains and some of our Belgians will ferment a little bit higher at like 85, but for the most part, we're sitting at 69. And once our yeast hits its terminal gravity, we're going to crash it down to 34 degrees. From inoculation to crashing, it's about 2 to 3 days, but, and you'll notice me saying this a lot, but it's really strain dependent. Yeast is awesome. It's like plants, like every different kind of yeast has a slightly different like vibe to it. So typically it's 2 to 3 days, but some will drag out 7, 10. It really depends. And we're kind of monitoring that as that goes. Once it's been crashed, we usually let it sit 2 days and then we harvest it, which is kind of the reverse of what a brewery would do, where they would dump the yeast and then collect all that delicious bright beer. We keep that yeast and then dump that fermented media. I have never tried our fermented media, but from what I've heard from folks, it's really not worth trying. So it's good that it's going to the drain. And then we'll do that first harvest where we're collecting that yeast, and we'll typically do 2 harvests, make sure we get all the yeast from there. Sometimes we'll do 3. It just depends on the strain. From like filling a tank to getting all that yeast out of the tank, it's about 10 days. But again, that's really variable. And then while all of this growing stuff is happening, we are cleaning. We are constantly cleaning, cleaning. And that's really important. Like I said in the beginning, like we need things to be sterile, not just SANI. So we have really high standards for cleaning, and our CIP process is pretty extensive. And yeah, that's pretty much a day in production. What I like about this industry is the people, like Rebecca kind of talked about. You get some really interesting characters. And a lot of the people that I work with or have come to know through the craft beer industry are like my best friends, which I think is an amazing thing. Also, just like the community at large in beer, gathering around a good beverage and just talking about it, and then also talking about ourselves and just like the greater world in general, I think is super awesome. And especially when I worked front of house, I got to, have conversations with people that I would have never talked to elsewise. So that was pretty cool, just to like get to know people that were just so different than myself. And then another part of that is like the creativity and innovation that we have in the craft beer industry. It is a lot of small business culture or startup culture, but I think a lot of the people that get into beer are just kind of like go for it kind of people. So when ideas are thrown around, instead of being like, I don't know if we could do that, it's like, go for it. Like, let's try it. Nobody's done it before. Let's see if we can do something cool with this. So I really like that. Especially that culture is like really big here at Imperial. And, there's a lot of things I love about this industry, but there's also been some challenges. Being a woman and then being a queer woman, I've definitely had some uncomfortable moments, especially like when I worked in a tap room, just, people are drinking and things get said, or just energy is out there, and it certainly rubbed me the wrong way, and I kind of just had to deal with it, which I wish I didn't have to, but that's just kind of the nature of some of these things right now. Then here at Imperial, we have 2 facilities here in Portland, and production's kind of all on its own. And there's certainly a lot of women that work at Imperial as a company, but in production, I'm the only one. And so it gets a little bit lonely. I certainly can talk to my male coworkers about a lot of things, but there are just some things that they just don't understand. And so I didn't realize that I was going to miss that or like want that, but I certainly do. And then lastly, just like the physical nature of my job, I wasn't expecting to have to like take care of myself in that way, like where I need to stretch or like think about the ergonomics of what I do. So that portion of production has been pretty challenging, but I'm also like learning how to take care of myself. So that's pretty cool as well. If I could do it all over again, I think I would have gotten into production a lot sooner. I think I just thought that there was going to be this like big knowledge gap, that you would need to like have homebrewed a lot or like been a super sciencey person or whatnot. When really, I don't want to say production is simple, because it's not, but just like the nature around it, like is like really fostering to like new people coming in, and like wanting to teach and share that knowledge. So I kind of wish that I had jumped from front of house to back of house sooner, because I really enjoy working in production. And then what I'm looking forward to, again, the creativity and innovation that we have here in beer. There's a lot of ideas that I've thrown around that I feel like I can get started, working on sustainability stuff, working on workplace culture. Here at Imperial, we have our Ideal Committee, which is basically our take on a DEI committee. And that's like a recent thing that I've gotten involved in, and that's really exciting to be a part of. So just like growing in that way as a person and then as a company, I think is really cool. And then also, obviously you guys can't see it because I've got my white background, but it's a beautiful sunny day here in Portland, Oregon, which at this time of year is like a rarity. So it's like nice to like slowly start to see spring and summer coming up. And as like pandemic restrictions are being lifted a little bit, I'm just really looking forward to just going outside and having good beer with people I care about, and also just some new people too. So yeah, lots to look forward to in that regard. And yeah, that's it. That's all my jam. Now I'm going to pass it over to Casey and have you take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm Casey Hellwig, sales manager here at Imperial Yeast. I'll kind of go through the same format, introduction to myself, and then what sales job is once the yeast is done being grown and analyzed in the lab, and then finally finish it up with some more personal stuff as well. So my journey in beer started in college, like many folks' journey in beer does. I was studying philosophy, and I spent many late nights with classmates talking and trying to kind of solve the world's problems while drinking good beer, as they put it. And so it was really them who kind of got me into the craft beer industry. Stone IPA was the beer that started it all. And, initially what really drew me to craft beer was just the diversity and depth of flavors and aromatics. Learning about all the different styles of beer was so fun. Like learning about why certain countries or certain places in the world produce a particular type of beer was just fascinating to me. But the thing that really kind of drew me outside of that was the community of the beer industry. I loved that it brings so many different people together all over a shared passion of a beverage. I thought that was super, super cool. So I started my time in the industry in 2008. I was working front of house at Beaver Street Brewing Company in Flagstaff, Arizona, serving and bartending. And it was there that I really started like kind of gaining knowledge. I would corner the brewers after their shift. So Beaver Street was a small brew pub. We had a 10-barrel brewery and a big restaurant. And then a few years after I started there, they opened a production facility not too far away called Lumberyard Brewing Company. Where I bartended most often, the bar that I bartended most often was kind of the brewers hangout after work. And so they'd be having a shift beer, like trying to relax after work. And I'd be like, hey guys, I have 700 questions for you today. And I would sit down and just kind of talk their ear off and started really like learning a ton about beer and about the process and about the just ingredients, et cetera, all of it. And I kind of decided like, hey, I'd really like to start home brewing. And around that time, I met a super cool guy. He was a big home brewer. And I was like, well, this is perfect. You are going to teach me how to home brew. We can date also. That sounds great. And so he's now my husband. But he started teaching me how to home brew and just really, really enjoyed that whole process. Loved experimenting with different types of yeast. And made plenty of really, really bad beer at the very beginning there. But both he and I really wanted to expand our careers in beer further. And so kind of like KB, we started looking all over the country at different places to move. And Portland, Oregon stood out just because it's such a beer capital. So many breweries here, so much opportunity. And so we moved here in 2013. I started working front of house at Base Camp Brewing Company. Again, just serving and bartending there. It was a pretty young company when I started, so super cool to kind of be a part of a startup for the first time in my life, in my career. And I quickly moved from front of house to a sales position there where I ended up managing Northwest Oregon and Southwest Washington sales for them before moving to Imperial. And kind of Imperial sort of fell into my lap. I wasn't really looking for a new job, but I wasn't super stoked on my current position. And I knew one of the owners here at Imperial, and he called me up one day and he's like, hey, do you want to come work for me at Imperial Yeast? And I was like, cool, sounds great. And he's a salesperson by trade. And so he totally sold me on it, made my job sound super great and glamorous. And I was like, yeah, this sounds wonderful. Not only is it an opportunity to work for a company that I think has a lot of potential, but it's also a great career move for me. So why not? I loved the idea of learning more about yeast. And so I moved here to Imperial in 2016. It was early 2016. So about 6-7 months after things started really getting rolling here. And it was full on startup mode at that point. I think I was the third employee hired by ownership. So if y'all have ever worked for a startup, especially a startup in beer, people wear lots of hats. And I quickly realized that Owen may have glamorized my job a little bit, but that's okay. It was an opportunity for me to learn so much. So I ended up kind of just overseeing all of the like customer facing things in those early days. So obviously sales and customer service, but shipping, managing the shipping and receiving side of things, managing accounting, marketing. And so really got to not only hone my skills as a salesperson, but I also got to learn about accounting, which I learned I'm really terrible at. I got to learn about Google Analytics and how to advertise via Google. And I also got to learn about international organics and shipping regulations around the world, which is about as exciting as it sounds and about as frustrating as it sounds. But over the years, people much better than myself have taken those positions over, and now my current position is just sales manager, where I see sales and oversee the sales in the customer service department. But it was so much fun. It's been such a great ride being a part of Imperial and just kind of witnessing and also being a part of the growth that we've experienced here. the opportunity to build our company culture and our processes. And then also kind of on the flip side of that, being willing to take a really hard look and critical eye towards our culture and our processes and constantly improve them. I think one of the coolest things about Imperial is we have a whole group, doesn't matter if you work in Portland or Philadelphia, a whole group of people that are like lifelong learners. And so we're constantly learning from each other and from our outside environments and applying that to make our jobs a better place. So in terms of what sales job looks like once the yeast has gone through production with KB's team or the Philly production team, and then gone through the lab with Rebecca's team or our lab team here in Portland, our job is really easy. Obviously we work hard, but our lab and production departments, they focus so much on the quality of product. So our job is super simple. We just focus on transparency and service. And without their hard work, we would have a much, much harder job at hand. We approach sales with an eye towards collaboration and relationship building rather than putting the hard sell on people. Nobody wants to be like cornered in their brewery with like a used car salesman attitude. So we do our best to just meet people where they are, have a conversation with them, and then get them what they need to make great beer. One way that we do this is by dialing in pitch rates for folks. Our standard recommendation for like a pitchable quantity of yeast is 11 million cells per mil. That results in a liter of slurry per barrel of wort. The reason that we recommend these rates, which are a little bit higher than what a lot of folks in the industry do recommend, is that we really want brewers to have a good experience with our product and be able to rely on our product to make good beer and make it quickly. So they're going to experience short lag times. They're going to see super fast and healthy fermentations. Obviously, they're going to see consistency in terms of flavor profile and aromatics, as well as really strong yields for harvesting and repitching multiple generations. From a brewer's perspective, especially a commercial brewer's perspective, if they're able to repitch yeast 5, 10, 15 times, their cost of yeast per barrel drastically reduces, saving them money. And we all know that despite what people might think, the brewing industry is really not like a cash cow. And so being able to save money and resources in your production department is huge. But also on the flip side of that, meeting people where they're at is really, really important to us. So we can custom pour any quantity basically based off of batch size, starting gravity, and desired pitch rate. On the homebrew side of things, we are the only lab to guarantee 200 billion cells in each pouch of yeast. This achieves the same outcomes as it does on the commercial side. You'll see super short lag times. There's nothing worse than spending like 6 or 8 hours on a brew day and pitching your yeast and just crossing your fingers that it's going to work. You want to see fermentation get like rolling really quick. And so those short lag times, you'll see fermentation kick off anywhere from like 4 to 12 hours after pitching, which is perfect. Alleviates some stress. You'll see quick and healthy fermentation, especially on the homebrew side. This is important because so many people don't have access to temperature controlled fermentation environments. And so those big fluctuations in temperature can really affect the quality of your beer. And you're going to see consistency in flavor and aroma profiles. I hear so many people say, homebrew, they give it a bad rap, right? It gets a bad rap because like, oh, it's always full of diacetyl or other off flavors. Like, no, it's not. Like, I think that as long as homebrewers have access to quality ingredients, they're educated in quality yeast, and they're pitching enough, those kinds of problems solve themselves. So pitching a pouch of yeast into 5 gallons of wort basically achieves that 11 million cells per mil pitch rate. Or if you want to look at it from a different perspective, if it's a standard gravity wort, you're going to kind of hit that golden rule or around that golden rule of 0.75 million cells per mil per degree Plato. Another piece that's super important to us on the sales side is education. We are constantly consulting with brewers, learning about what their desired yeast and fermentation characteristics are. to help them choose a strain that's going to work best for them and the type of beer that they're making. We do this obviously with one-off yeast for one-off beers, but more importantly, we do it for house yeast strains and helping a brewer choose a house ale or a house lager strain that they can use in a super wide variety of beers, and get different flavors and aromatics and even fermentation characteristics, really by just adjusting pitch rates or temperatures, et cetera, is going to kind of help them with that that money savings, cost savings piece of things. If they're able to use a house strain and produce 5 to 10 different ales with the same yeast strain, they're going to use that strain over and over and over again, thus reducing their yeast costs over time. Our technical department is amazing. I don't know, I think combined, they've got like 50 years of brewing experience, which is crazy. But they not only can answer any fermentation related questions that anyone might ever dream up, even myself, which I dream up all sorts of crazy questions to ask our tech team on a regular basis. But they also can help with anything beer related or process or even equipment related, just because of their depth of experience. We've been offering yeast management classes. These are super cool. They're in person. We've just been doing them in Portland for now, but we are hoping to expand to our Philadelphia facility here shortly. They're in-person one-day classes where people from our local community or from outside, if you want to travel, can come in and learn kind of the ins and outs of yeast management. So basically storage to pitching, to managing the fermentation in a way that's going to make the yeast most happy and your beer taste the best it can, to harvesting, cell counting, viability testing, and ultimately repitching and then managing that yeast for multiple generations. In addition to those in-person classes, we just launched a video, or we are just launching rather, here soon, a video series for commercial brewers that focus on the same topic. So if people aren't able to attend an in-person class here in Portland or in Philly, they can go to YouTube and they can watch a tutorial on counting and viability testing, and then repitching based off of that count and viability test, yeast management like harvesting and storage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We also have a video series for home brewers that kind of focuses on the more homebrew approach to yeast management. So check it out. But bottom line from us, in terms of our sales team and what our job is it's really just to make things as easy as possible to work with us and enjoyable to work with us. We have multiple strains that are guaranteed in stock, so lead times are super short and basically non-existent. And we're here to answer questions and help out any way we can. Doesn't matter if you make 5 gallons like once a year, or you make 100 barrels of beer on a daily basis. We love this industry and we love making it a better place. Things that I like about this industry, my gosh, I kind of touched on some of them, but the community that this industry creates is just incredible. I've had the opportunity to travel all over the states and be a part of collaborations and events and really get to know local brewing scenes all over the place. And while each one is super unique and different, I think that there's a lot of commonality between them. One of them being just that super collaborative spirit, everybody just willing to kind of help each other out and lend not only physical ingredients to other brewers, but also expertise. I love the friendships that I've built. I think some of my lifelong best friends I've met either working here or working in the industry in general. Got friends all over the map, and it's all because of beer. I've been to their weddings and I've met their babies, and it's just so much fun to be able to say like, hey, my job also is a huge part of my like personal life, and I've got so much community based around it. I think one of the coolest things about this industry is its scrappiness. I think we've experienced that through COVID, especially the last few years. people have really had to take a hard look at how they're operating their business and make big, scary changes and pivots over the course of the last few years and figure out how to survive. We're all so passionate about what we do, but passion only gets you so far. And so people here in this industry, they are like willing to work hard and take risks. And I think that we've seen how resilient the industry is over the last few years. And then finally, like, people don't take themselves too seriously. I love that about this industry. It's like, we're making beer. We're not like saving the world or anything, but maybe we are through our like our attitude and our community that we're building. But it's just an enjoyable industry to be working in. But that being said, obviously there's been challenges. Being a woman in this industry is super tough. I think that for a really long time, the beer industry has kind of been sort of this like monolithic, image. And if you don't look like a white dude with a beard, a straight white dude at that with a beard, you have a harder time finding a place at the table and getting a foot in the door and really making an impact. So, I personally obviously have experienced lots and lots of microaggressions and misogynist kind of comments and experiences. I've experienced outright sexual harassment. And each time I've faced these issues, I definitely, it's made me kind of take a step back and evaluate if I wanted to be in beer, and if it's something that I can see myself doing for the long haul. And each time I came to the conclusion of yes, through talking to family and friends. I love this industry and I'm so passionate about it, and I really want to help make it a better place. But it's certainly challenging sometimes. But over the last few years, especially the last year and a half or so, I think that we're seeing kind of a paradigm shift, and things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and promoting women and people of color and people from the LGBTQ community into positions of leadership and power is something that people are really paying attention to. And at first I was like, Brianne at Rat Magnet on Instagram, she started this reckoning, and it was this, incredibly powerful moment. And there was so much talk, and it was really hard not to be like kind of cynical, like, oh, it's just kind of this fad, but it's definitely not a fad. I think that seeing the changes that have been made over the last few years has been incredible and also very inspiring. There's so many professional organizations all around the country, whether they're MBAAs or state guilds, top quality groups, the ASBC, Pink Boots, et cetera, that are working to make the industry a better place through scholarships and internships and experiences and education that are designed to help people like women, people of color, people in the LGBTQ community get their foot in the door and really thrive in the industry. Here in Oregon, I have the opportunity to sit on the Oregon Brewers Guild Board of Directors, as well as serve on their DEI committee. We just launched our own program. It's called Mashing Barriers. It's a 12-week paid internship program designed to help folks that are underrepresented gain entry into the craft beer industry. It's really kind of a grain to glass experience, super immersive. Not only do you get to learn the whole brewing process from cellaring to wort production to packaging, but also get to see front of house operations, sales and marketing operations at the brewery that you're interning at, as well as visit hop farms, a malting facility, and our yeast facility. And our first intern started like 3 weeks ago at Von Ebert Brewing here in Portland. And it's been so incredible just like witnessing her passion and excitement to be have the opportunity to get her foot in the door here in the industry. So as hard as it is, I think that this industry is definitely well on its way to becoming more diverse, more equitable, more inclusive. If people don't see themselves represented drinking at a pub or a brewery or a craft beer bar, then they're not going to go and drink there. And so our industry recognized that and is making some really big strides in changing it for the better. In terms of what I'm looking forward to here at Imperial, our R&D department has been really hard at work over the last several months, creating some rad new hybrid strains for us to use. It's basically what it sounds like. We're taking 2 parent strains using directed mating and sporulation techniques to create a whole slew of child strains. And then we run it through a series of testing, obviously here in the lab, brewery trials, QC sensory trials, and we're about to release our first hybrid strain. So we're super excited on that front. Stay tuned for more information there. But our hope is to create and release several of them each year. And it's so much fun to be a part of a business that is kind of pushing the industry forward and responding to brewers' needs in terms of what they want beer to taste like and what they want in terms of aromatics, flavors, and even just like basic fermentation characteristics out of their yeast. And then outside of kind of internal excitement, I'm just really excited, like KB said, that pandemic restrictions are finally lifting. We're going to events again. We get to see people's smiling faces drinking beer, and it's so fun to share beer with people again. That's all we got for you folks. Thanks so much for your time and your interest in supporting women in beer. And if you have any questions, we'll answer them now.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was really great. I like that we get kind of a different perspective from each of you in a different department there. That's excellent. All right. Yes, we do have a few questions. Just going to kind of start from the top. Also, Rebecca, thank you for commenting on these as they were happening. That was excellent. Okay, so first off, is there an equation that you prefer to use to determine the concentration/density of cells based on viability?
Rebecca, you want to handle that one?
Yeah. I was like, oh, I have to unmute my mic. Yeah, so I kind of answered this while Casey was doing her part. We do have a formula, yes, and it is basically we extrapolate that concentration based off of our 200x dilution that we do in the lab, and then we have this very nifty automatic cell counter. It's made by Nexalon, and oh my gosh, is it a game changer? Because prior to working here, cell counting meant using what's called a hemocytometer, and it's basically like a microscope slide that has like a grid on it, and you would just like count a random assortment of the cells and the squares and just extrapolate the concentration from there. But now we have it like built into the software for the Nexalon cell counter. So basically what we do is we take a sample of yeast and we dye it with an AOPI dye. It's like an orangey dye, and it makes the cells fluoresce, and the cytometer will count all of the fluorescent cells, and it's within like a certain cell diameter. So I think it's about like 5 micrometers, I want to say. So yeah, we do have a formula. I do not know it off the top of my head, that's for sure. But I hope that clarifies it at least a little bit. There is like an overarching formula. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Next one is, which strain has been your most challenging / rewarding to work with? And I think it'd be cool to hear both the lab and production side on this one, if that's cool.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I answered that one before too, so I'll go first because I very quickly said AO9 Pub as the most challenging to work with because we actually just started growing it like in the last couple of weeks in our Philadelphia location, and it has certainly been a challenge. It is like, it's such a flocculent strain that I will pipette up like 500, like a half mil of pub into my pipette, and it will just like flocculate in the tip and just like get stuck in there. So when I try to put it onto a plate for a flood, like it's just like a little goop. You know what? I can just go on forever. I could do a whole separate talk about just that. But yeah, that's definitely the most challenging one for me. What about you, KB?
I could also give a whole talk about the challenges of pub.
Yeah, we'll do that next year. Table that for next year.
Pub. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it could probably be 3 hours. But that one is pretty challenging. It's flocculation. Like the time that it takes to flocculate is crazy fast. So harvesting it is super challenging. We had to change like a lot of our harvesting process just for that one particular strain to get it to actually come out of the tank. So that one's the most challenging. And then a lot of our Brett strains, I would say, are the most rewarding, just because they're just so different. They kind of have their own personality that's like really apparent, and they're so resilient. Like a lot of the time, like we're like, is it going to get going? Like, is it like fermenting? And then like a week later, boom, it just starts ripping. So I really like the Brett strains. They also smell the best when they're fermenting, like just giving off the like kind of funky, like pineapple, like, I don't know, just make you want to have a beer. Like when you harvest the other ones, it's like, it kind of smells strange. You don't really want to eat or drink anything after, but with the Brett strains, I'm all about those guys. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. No, this is good. Now we've got some extra topic ideas for next year. This is perfect. I'm going to skip over this next question and save that for last because that'll be fun. So next up, is there an average number of times I can use a yeast strain before it is no longer viable?
Yeah, I can take that one. It kind of depends. And I know that when I was first learning about beer, I would hear "it depends" like every other word, and it just used to drive me insane. But now here I am, and I'm like, it depends. But typically, if you're in a production environment and you're using it in standard gravity wort, you're not introducing hops or any other like foreign ingredients, like fruit would be the most obvious, but any other additions that people are putting in their beers these days. You're fermenting at average temperatures, and your fermentation time is pretty average, and you're able to harvest it immediately and then reuse it within a few days. You can get anywhere from, most breweries go at least 5 generations to about 15 is about average. But some breweries take it much further. I talk to people all the time that are on Gen 30, Gen 50, Gen 100 sometimes, and you're like, what? Is that even still the same strain that we fed you? And then some breweries are just one and done. So the main things to consider are type of beer that you're making, when you harvest it. So you want to harvest it as soon as you hit terminal gravity. So as soon as you hit terminal gravity, crash your tank, harvest your yeast prior to any sort of dry hop addition or fruit addition or marshmallows or whatever the heck you're putting in your beer. And then storage time is the other really, really big piece. So you want to put that in a cold environment, store it in a container or a keg that has a PRV or some sort of pressure relief system built in, or it's manual. You can just manually release pressure every single day. And you want to reuse that yeast within 2 to 3 to 5 days, kind of typical. You can kind of keep it in a cooler up to about 2 weeks, but at that point, you're going to start seeing a pretty significant drop in viability. Another way to increase the amount of generations that you're using your yeast is by cell counting and viability testing every single time, so that you're pitching a known quantity and a controlled quantity of yeast each time you repitch your beer, and then harvest and go about that process again.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. We got another one added in here by Michelle. Thanks, Michelle. Right at the end. Fermentus talked about flocculation for sedimentation. Does the flocculation nature of pub make it fall out of liquid more quickly due to the mass of the cells grouping together, as opposed to settling to the bottom when they are tuckered out?
Yes. So that strain is got the biggest cell size of all of the strains in our yeast bank. And so absolutely that's a huge factor, is those big giant cells kind of clumping together with others and just flocking out. And often pub you'll experience on the brewing side of things some diacetyl issues because it'll flock out before it's even finished fermenting or cleaning up diacetyl at the end of fermentation.
Awesome. Okay. And final question here, and we'll just have all three of you give this. What is your favorite beer / style?
I've always really liked saisons, even before I knew anything about beer, which I have not known very much for very long. And I mentioned this in my answer that I wrote, but I was a Neanderthal and I loved Miller High Life. It was like exclusively what I drank before I started working here. So I've come a long way, I swear.
Well, just like pub, I think I could probably give a whole talk about my favorite beer style, but I love lagers. I love golden, crispy lagers. The first brewery I worked at, Sudrick, was a lager house, and I just kind of like drank the Kool-Aid on like the deliciousness of just like a really simple lager. So I would say probably Pilsners. If I really want to spice things up, I'll get a dry hopped Pilsner. Those are just like so tasty in the summer. But yeah, that's my drink of choice for sure. And if we're just going to talk about beers that we had before we worked in craft beer, like Rebecca, I would say Olympia. Like in college, like getting Ollie's was like pretty special. So yeah, I'm kind of sad it's gone, but yeah.
Yeah, RIP. I'll take the cop-out answer and just say whatever beer is in my hand is my favorite, because I don't really have a favorite style. I think it depends on so many things, like what the weather's like, my mood. Do I really want to have a good time and drink the 9% beer? Do I want to like drink a 4% lager and be in it for the long haul? So just really depends on a whole bunch of factors for me, but I'll also be super basic and say that I live in the Northwest and I love IPAs, and they will always be something that I'm drawn to.
Fantastic. Okay, we had one more come in at the last minute, and I think it's a pretty good one. So I do want to get this in. It's from Dana. A lot of breweries have mentioned that there's a bit of a lag or lower cell counts / viability in the first gen of a new batch of yeast, but that it improves with subsequent generations. Can you provide some tips for how to avoid that first pitch being a little harder to work with?
Yeah, if you guys want to jump in on this one, I'll kind of take it over first. So Dana, that's a really good question, and something that we were trying to address and achieve, or I guess address with our higher pitch rate recommendations. So most lab pitches, you're going to get a lower concentration of cells or a lower pitch rate than you would pitch on subsequent generations. And so the folks that started Imperial, they all came from Y yeast, and one of the most common things they heard over and over again was, oh, I have to treat my batch 1 yeast differently than I do my batch 2, 3, 4, whatever. And often they were hearing lag times were longer. They were having to kind of prop in smaller beers, so lighter ABV or starting gravity beers, and let the basically account for a longer tank residency time because of a longer lag and a longer finish to fermentation. And so we were really trying to solve that problem, giving people that 11 million cells per mil. If you are pitching standard gravity wort, you're going to be right around that, like 0.75 million cells per mil per degree Plato pitch rate at that pitching rate of 11 million cells per mil, if I'm not confusing everybody by all of the big numbers. And so hopefully when using Imperial, you don't see any significant lag times. You don't see any significant tank residency times. you don't have to baby it in a smaller beer before you move it onto a standard gravity or even a larger gravity beer. Hopefully that answers your question, Dana.
Excellent. Any KB or Rebecca, do either of you want to chip in on that one too? Any thoughts?
I'll be the first to admit I know embarrassingly little about that. But I mean, just from, you know, I'm just editorializing, but it is stressful to get poured into a jug and then transported. So I'm sure that maybe just like environmental stressors might have at least a little bit to do with that first pitch being a little laggy. But again, purely speculation on my end. So I don't know if KB has anything cool to add.
I think Casey nailed it. So yeah.
Excellent. Okay, well that's all of our questions. Thank you three so very, very much. There was a lot of excellent, really, really good information in there. I really appreciated it. Yeah, and I guess that's going to do it for the session here. Hope everybody has a good rest of the summit. It looks like we have a Pink Boots Society session starting up soon, a Grainfather giveaway, building a beer and kombucha brewery. So yeah, everybody have a good rest of the day. And thank you once again to Casey, KB, and Rebecca.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.